Around Christmas 1980, the famous UFO sightings occurred involving two Air Force bases near Rendlesham in Suffolk. A landed craft was encountered, and one of the witnesses, Sergeant Jim Penniston, touched it, and a series of ones and zeros came into his head and didn't stop until he'd written them down in his notebook. It was not until 2010, however, after casually mentioning it to someone, that he realised this was binary code, and he found it was a message in English, giving longitude and latitude references to several ancient places, including the Great Pyramid in Egypt, and seeming to imply that the origin of the craft was a mysterious island off the coast of Ireland called Hy-Brasil, which appeared on several old maps and in Irish folklore, but in which was never able to be found, seeming to imply that it was a submersible extraterrestrial base which has been there for centuries. In 1992, after the Rendlesham sighting, but before the message was deciphered, I was working for a local authority education project, assisting the setup of a .com weather satellite system linked to the Meteosat satellite. On one of the pictures I saw what seemed to be some kind of object off the south of Ireland that I thought might be a UFO. In 2020, when I'd read the Rendlesham message, I noticed that it was in the same position as Hy-Brasil on the 14th century map. In 2002, I had 2 emails from Gloria Hazel of Staines, who said she had positive feelings when in Chertsey, Surrey, where she was brought up, and at Pipestone and Sedona in Arizona, and wondered if there was a ley alignment joining them. Plotting a great circle on a globe, I found that they were aligned, and the alignment went through the area of the pyramids in Egypt. In 2020, I found Sedona and the Great Pyramid were mentioned in the Rendlesham message, and Hy-Brasil seems to be on the alignment. It seemed as if the 3 of us, Jim Penniston, Gloria Hazel and myself, who have never met, have been given parts of a puzzle to prove that this is not just something somebody made up. But by who? On watching a programme from the Ancient Aliens TV series recently, I was interested to see Giorgio Tsoukalos reporting on the experience of Jim Penniston, one of the witnesses to the famous Rendlesham Forest case. This involved a message, apparently in binary code, received by one of the witnesses, Sergeant Jim Penniston. This gave locations of some of the places on the Sedona Pyramids ley proposed by Gloria Hazel, and an origin of the visitors which may also have been on it. In 2010 it was revealed by Jim Penniston that he initiated a download of information when he touched the pictorial glyphs on the craft of unknown origin during his investigations in the early morning hours of December the 26th, 1980 in Rendlesham Forest. 26-year-old Sergeant James Penniston was part of the 3-man USAF security police team called to investigate the landed craft of unknown origin in Rendlesham Forest. The men with Sergeant Penniston were A1C John Burrows and A1C Ed Cabansag. Only Penniston and Burrows went into the woods to investigate the landed craft. Cabansag stayed near the truck as a radio relay for the men. Cabansag watched the mysterious pulsating multicoloured lights in the forest, while his 2 team members headed out on foot. As Penniston and Burrows approached the unusual lights, they noticed abnormal sensations on their hair, skin and clothing. It seemed as though the air was electrically charged. Also, a time distortion occurred. According to the men, the time seemed as though it was slowed and very difficult to move. Another odd characteristic was everything was void of sound. Now visible, the craft was sitting silently at the bottom of a berm, on the pine forest floor. Penniston cautiously approached the non-aerodynamic triangular black glassy craft. It was like nothing he had ever witnessed before or since. The craft had patterns of blue, yellow and red colours running through the surface as though part of the craft. It was very difficult to put into words what he was witnessing. Sergeant Peniston was versed in all types of aircraft. He was a United States Air Force trained aircraft observer and crash investigator. As part of his USAF advanced training, he studied both the NATO and Warsaw Pact inventories of aircraft. His up-close investigation of the craft included photographs, measurements and drawings, which he recorded into his USAF-issued notebook. He took special note of the strange pictorial-type markings on the side of the craft. These glyphs were logged by Sergeant Peniston. He also touched pictorial symbols etched into the glass-like surface of the 9-foot by 9-foot black triangular craft. When Sergeant Peniston put his hand on the etched symbols, which felt like sandpaper compared to the rest of the smooth moulded surface, everything became a brilliant bright white. He could neither see nor hear. He was alone in a brilliant bright white light. This occurred for an undetermined amount of time, and then his sight returned. He was standing next to the craft, facing the pictorial glyphs. The craft started to turn a vivid bright white colour, so bright in fact Sergeant Peniston thought it was going to explode. He took a defensive position nearby as the craft was engulfed in the light. The craft then lifted off, apparently 4 feet from the ground, manoeuvred between the trees, ascended to treetop level and disappeared in the blink of an eye. The glyphs on the landed object. The following day, after touching the main largest glyph, back in his room, Jim was seeing ones and zeros in his mind's eye. Troubled by the revolving flashing images of ones and zeros he received from touching the glyphs, he felt compelled to write them down in a notebook. Jim records the ones and zeros in his notebook. Upon completing the transfer to notebook paper, the image in his mind disappeared. Jim put his notebook away with his belongings and didn't think much about it again until the year 2010. Then, during a casual conversation with a researcher, he mentioned the codes and displayed the notebook. The researcher immediately recognized the ones and zeros as binary code and set out to help Jim decipher it. And it was decoded by professional binary code expert Joe Luciano. There seem to be latitude and longitude references to significant places which some researchers have linked with Earth energy grids. The message reads: Exploration of Humanity 666-8100. This suggests some kind of project from the year 666 AD to 8100. 666 was the year of the founding of Chertsey Abbey, mentioned by Gloria Hazel as one of the places with similar feelings to Sedona, Arizona, and found to be on a great circle between it and the Great Pyramid. 52.094253 north, 13.131269W. This is the reference for Hy-Brasil, the Phantom Island of Ireland. Hy-Brasil is a mysterious island appearing on maps from 1325 to the 1800s. This map is from 1325. In Irish myth, it was said to be clouded in mist, except for one day every 7 years, when it became visible, but still could not be reached. Stories about the island have circulated throughout Europe for centuries, with tales that it was the promised land of saints or a paradise where advanced civilization lived. On most maps, the island was located roughly 321 kilometres, 200 miles, off the west coast of Ireland in the North Atlantic Ocean. Does this imply that it's the craft's origin, on a par with other significant places, but possibly able to be submerged? The Sedona to Pyramids line, postulated by Gloria Hazel, could pass through it, as it goes through the southern part of Ireland before reaching Britain. Continuous for planetary advance. Fourth coordinate, UQS CBPR before. 16.763177 north, 89.117768 west, Karakol, Belize, Mayan ruins. Karakol is a large ancient Maya archaeological site in the Cayo district of Belize, approximately 40 kilometers south of Swantanish and San Ignacio Cayo, and 15 kilometers away from the Macal River. It rests on the Vaca Plateau at an elevation of 500 meters above sea level, in the foothills of the Maya Mountains. It was one of the most important regional political centers in the Maya lowlands during the Classic period, and covered approximately 200 square kilometers, much larger than present-day Belize City, and supported more than twice the modern city's population. Karakol is a modern name from Spanish meaning snail or shell. Kana Sky Palace is the largest building at Karakol and is the tallest man-made structure in Belize at 43 meters tall, 141 feet. 34.800272 north, 111.843567 west, Sedona, Arizona. Regarded as energetic and spiritual, sometimes called the American Glastonbury. Sedona is a town in Arizona, USA, which has gained a reputation as a spiritual energy centre similar to Glastonbury in the United Kingdom. It's claimed to have vortexes which are thought to be swirling centres of energy that are conducive to healing, meditation and self-exploration. These are places where the earth seems especially alive with energy. The Palatki ruins, located near Sedona, are an ancient site that is filled with cliff dwellings, as well as pictographs and petroglyphs that were created by the southern Sinagua people who inhabited the Sedona and Verde Valley area from 500 to about 1425 AD. Palatki, which is the Hopi word for red house, features a cliff dwelling that was constructed in roughly 1150 AD. The cliff dwelling is about 2 stories high and contains the telltale pottery sherds that are the reminders of the lives of those who once dwelled here. Although the petroglyphs and pictographs are quite close to the cliff dwelling, they are not related to it. Many of the 1,000 petroglyphs and pictographs are between 5,000 and 6,000 years old, far older than the cliff dwelling. The rock art features a myriad of pictures and symbols that are rendered in various colours. Among the pictures are humans, grizzly bears, horses, coyote, deer, and even rattlesnakes. 29.977836 north, 31.131649 east, Great Pyramid in Giza, Egypt. The Great Pyramid of Giza, also known as the Pyramid of Khufu or Pyramid of Cheops, is the oldest and largest of the 3 pyramids in the Giza Pyramid Complex, bordering present-day Giza in Greater Cairo, Egypt. It's the oldest of the 7 wonders of the ancient world and the only one to remain largely intact. 14.701 505S 75167 west, Nazca Lines in Peru. The Nazca Lines are a group of very large geoglyphs made in the soil of the Nazca Desert in southern Peru. They were created between 500 BC and 500 AD by people making depressions or shallow incisions in the desert floor, removing pebbles and leaving differently coloured dirt exposed. The area seems to be on 3 great circle lines involving other sites mentioned in the Rendlesham message. One goes through Nazca, then Oak Island, Nova Scotia, Canada, and Tai Shan Q in China. Another goes through Nazca, Tai Shan Q, and Ayers Rock in Australia. Another goes through Nazca, Karakol, Belize, Sedona, and Tai Shan Q. The 3 lines meet again at Tai Shan Q, meaning this is antipodal to Nazca. The 3 lines meeting at Nazca meet again at Tai Shan Q in China, on the other side of the world. 36.256845 north, 117.100632 east, Taishan Q, China, known as China's holiest mountain. Mount Tai is located just north of the city of Tai'an. Evidence of human settlement of the area can be proven from the Neolithic period onwards. Religious worship of Mount Tai has a tradition dating back 3,000 years. The name Tai'an of the neighbouring city is attributed to the saying, "If Mount Tai is stable, so is the entire country." 37.110195 north, 25.372281 east, Portara at Temple of Apollo in Naxos, Greece. The imposing ruins of the iconic Portara, or gate, still stand on the islet of Palatia, near Naxos, Greece. What remains of a temple dedicated to Apollo, which was built in the 6th-7th century BC and was never completed, stands behind it today in mute beauty. According to Greek mythology, the god Theseus left Ariadne, whom he had earlier abducted from Crete, after he had killed the Minotaur, to live on Naxos. This site seems to be on the Sedona, Hy-Brasil Chertsey line postulated by Gloria Hazel, before it reaches the Great Pyramid. Eyes of your eyes. Origin 52.0942532 north, 13.131269 west. Hy-Brasil. Origin year 8100. This seems to suggest that the origin of the craft is Hy-Brasil, and the origin year is 8100, seemingly implying that they are time travellers. The time distortion at Rendlesham could be caused by proximity to a time engine. While I was doing the work on the Negginstones roundabout in 2002, I received the following email from Gloria Hazel of the Stains.5u.com site. I was just looking through your site again. It's funny, when I was a kid back in the 50s, I went to school in Chertsey, Stepgates, and Mum used to take me on her bike, and we used to go round the back of Chertsey Church, where the Abbey now stands, and across the golf course, where I saw UFO in 1986-7, back to Chertsey Lane, where we lived. She always told me about the history of the area, and I always felt something special there at the Abbey ground. I still do. I love it there. The same with the Lammas and St Mary's Church. I've often wandered around the churchyard there searching for something. Anyway, I always felt something about the Stains roundabout too, and in actual fact lived not far from there, Bowes Road, back in the early 80s, until I moved to America. While in America, I lived first in New Jersey on the East Coast, and then stumbling one day upon another ancient site in Minnesota while on a trip, moved there a few years later. Pipestone, Minnesota is a very sacred site to the Dakota people, and it's where their ceremonial peace pipes come from. The site is on a vortex, and I believe it too is on a ley line, the same one that comes from Sedona, Arizona. That is also a very special place. I often wondered if it was the same one that runs through here, as the feelings were always that of being home to me. When Sedona and Surrey are aligned on a great circle, this also seems to pass through the area of the pyramids in Egypt. I later found that significantly it goes through Naxos, Greece, and the mystery island of Hy-Brasil off Ireland. Hy-Brasil, Surrey, Naxos, and the Great Pyramid. At this scale it's impossible to be precise. Each band has a scale width of about 100 miles, but there is good accuracy as long as the northernmost and southernmost points are at the same latitude, and the line is straight when viewed from above all round the globe. Gloria also writes of a UFO sighting at Mixnam's Lane, very close to the St Mary's Staines, Neggan Stones, Chertsey Abbey lay, which actually runs along the other side of the roundabout, through part of the entrance to Thorpe Park. She writes, "The UFO was back in 1984 or 86. I came back from a holiday both years from America and can't remember which one it was. And I'd gone out with a couple of friends for the evening. One of them lived on a houseboat on the river just beyond the golf course. We were driving back with her in 2 cars to make sure she got back okay, as it was dark, and we were behind her, and we drove around the road from Chertsey Staines Lane through Mixnham's Lane towards the golf course. A dark little lane that was not paved at the time. It may be now. I haven't been there for ages. Anyway, as we rounded a bend, I saw something above the trees. It was bright. I thought first it was a street lamp, then realised that there were none around there. So I said to my friend, 'What do you think that is?' She said she didn't know, and we did the usual da-da-da-da-da theme as a joke. By now, we were closer to it, and almost at the car park, where my friend would leave the car at the edge of the course, before you get to the buildings of the clubhouse. At this point we saw that my friend had stopped her car and was running towards us. We stopped and jumped out too, to hear Jill say, 'Did you see that thing?' She sounded scared. For some reason at this point I decided to go and see what it was, and started to run towards it. My friends later told me I was shouting, 'We have to welcome them,' but I don't remember that. I just wanted to see more. I always say at this point, they decided they didn't want to have a crazy woman running up to them, so they took off running. They were originally just at tree level, but went higher very quickly, and I guess they were about at helicopter height, and they were off towards the St Anne's Hill area. Quite quickly at first, they seemed to slow down, and we watched them for a while, just every so often putting a spotlight beam down close to the ground, as if they were looking for something. The ship was not cigar-shaped, not round, but somewhere in between. And the thing I remember most vividly is the light. It was more like a halogen light, but back then we hadn't heard of them. It was bright and white. It also very quiet, no sound at all. Then all of a sudden we couldn't see it anymore. I realised I was a nutcase running after it, but I did it on impulse. My friends were mad at me because they said I could have been taken away. Guess I could have, but didn't think of it at the time. We decided that I should call someone to report it, and we agreed on the Air Force. Somehow I found a number and called. I told the man what we'd seen. He told me that he had been told to tell people it was the Europa Nightclub Balloon, as so many people had reported seeing it. He then said, "Actually, I would have thought you were all crazy, but a friend of mine also saw it, and I know he isn't crazy." The way he spoke was as if he hadn't wanted to say it was this nightclub balloon, but had been told that he had to say that. When he said about his friends seeing it too, that sort of told me we had seen a UFO, and it was his way of telling me so. For a nightclub, it was very quiet. I also had another experience on Mixnham's Lane coming from Jill's at night. I was driving along and I saw lights in my rear view mirror. They got closer and then disappeared. There was no road or driveway for them to go into, they just went. I had that same experience in Pennsylvania once too, on my own at night on a highway that had no traffic except me. Then I saw a car coming up quickly behind me and thought, well, he's going fast. Then before he got to me, he just went too. No side turn, no place to turn off in the mountains, well, big hills. But by this time I thought, okay, it's yet another UFO, and it didn't faze me. That was in 1990. In March 1992, I was working as a resource assistant for Surrey TVEI, Technical and Vocational Educational Initiative, a local authority educational advisory organisation. We had just purchased a .com weather satellite system, and I had been involved in setting it up and running it. I noticed something unusual on the transmission sent on March the 4th. It was a white dot, relatively large. In part of the picture off southwest Ireland. I've not noticed anything similar on any other pictures sent by the satellite, Meteosat. The picture was taken in visible light, some of the transmissions were in infrared, at 4:30 in the afternoon. The software has facilities for enhancing the pictures in various ways. One is a zoom facility by which one can enlarge a chosen section of any picture. I found that for some reason the overlays representing the outlines of land masses did not appear in the normal sized picture, but they did on the zoomed version. I don't know why this is, but it was useful in this instance, for it showed the white dot was not a rogue dot coming from the overlay, and it also allowed easy recognition of the position of the object, if such it was, though not the height, of course. The fact that nothing of the kind was noticed on any other of the pictures seems to indicate that it was not likely to be anything like an aircraft or a ship, or a defect in the transmission. Also, although it was not very apparent in the reproduction here, when the original picture is magnified, the unidentified dot is much more solid white than the overlay dots, which seem rather diffused. It also seems rounder. Although I didn't know of the Hy-Brasil tradition at the time, I was just thinking it might be a UFO. The dot seems to have been in the approximate position of the Mystery Island on the 14th century map. The Rendlesham UFO incident had occurred several years before, but this strange message that Jimiston apparently received, mentioning Hy-Brasil, was not decoded till many years later. What are we to make of all this? It seems to indicate that Hy-Brasil is a submersible extraterrestrial base which has been here for centuries, and that this has been imparted from several events in a rather convoluted timeline. Also, it seems to be important to realise that it's part of a grid alignment going through Sedona and the Great Pyramid. The number 666, the year of the founding of Chertsey Abbey, in the message could indicate that the Abbey is the significant point in the West London area, and Gloria's statement that it had the same feeling as Sedona to her supports this. Why these things have been revealed at this particular time we don't know, but the timings of the events would seem to be deliberate.